My name is Aubrey Collins, and I've spent most of my adult life chasing a dream most people couldn't understand, even the people who were supposed to love me the most. It wasn't fame I was after, or fortune, or recognition. I didn't want my face on magazine covers or my recipes in cookbooks stacked in boutique shops. I wasn't chasing a lifestyle. I was chasing something far more sacred. I wanted to build a restaurant, not just a business, but a sanctuary. A place where food wasn't just sustenance. It was storytelling, where gumbo whispered memories of my grandmother's kitchen, where a simple tart could wrap its arms around someone's broken heart, where strangers could walk in burdened and leave lighter. But in my family's eyes, it was just a phase. Another foolish endeavor from the emotional one, the dreamer, the disappointment. I'm 34 now. I've worked in some of the hardest kitchens on 3 different continents. I've peeled potatoes in Paris, cleaned shrimp in Cape Town, scrubbed burnt pots in New Orleans. I've been screamed at by head chefs, laughed at by line cooks, and ignored by critics. But through it all, I kept going. Because every burn on my hand, every scar on my wrist, every midnight shift where I collapsed from exhaustion, brought me one step closer to what I knew I was born to build, Ember and Oak. The name came to me one night while I was sipping whiskey alone on the fire escape of my Boston apartment. The smell of smoke drifted from a neighbor's BBQ, and for a moment, I was 8 years old again, standing on a stool beside Grandma Jo, stirring roux in her kitchen in Shreveport, Louisiana. She used to say, "Baby, cook like you're telling a secret." And I always did. Ember, for the fire that never dies. Oak, for the roots that hold you up even when the world tries to blow you down. When I first saw the building that would become Ember and Oak, it was a disaster, a crumbling, abandoned firehouse on a quiet street in Cambridge. The roof sagged, the bricks were chipped, the air smelled like mildew and old regret. Most people saw a teardown. I saw a stage, a blank canvas, and maybe, just maybe, a home. I emptied every cent from my savings, took out loans I wasn't sure I'd ever repay, sold the last of my vintage cookbooks, even pawned Grandma Jo's silver set, her most prized possession, to cover my first round of equipment. There were no investors, no silent partners, no bailout if I failed. Just me, and belief, and an aching hunger that had nothing to do with food. 3 months in, the bones of the place were finally starting to show promise. We'd ripped up the warped floors and laid down dark walnut. I sourced custom light fixtures made from salvaged copper piping, refinished the fireman's pole into a coat rack, even turned the old engine bay into an open kitchen so guests could see the fire, the motion, the poetry of a dinner service in action. Every single detail mattered to me. Every corner told a story, even the walls, painted deep green like collard greens on Grandma Jo's stove. I designed a menu with 26 dishes, not trendy, not showy, but honest, rooted in memory and love, a crawfish étouffée that tasted like home, a beignet filled with bourbon custard and quiet rebellion, collard green gnocchi, my own little middle finger to traditional Italian purists. My sous chef, Darren, came from a high-end Boston hotel. He was the kind of man who never raised his voice, but when he did speak, the kitchen listened. He believed in me more than anyone had in years. Lexi, my pastry chef, was a genius with sugar and fire. She once torched a creme brulee while crying over a breakup, and the result was so beautiful we kept it on the menu. They weren't just staff, they were family. Which is ironic, considering my real one couldn't be bothered. I decided to break the news at Thanksgiving. I'd flown back to Philadelphia just for the holiday. I wanted to tell them in person. I even printed a mock-up of the restaurant logo and brought it in a little black folder, hoping, maybe stupidly, they'd be proud. My father, Gregory Collins, was already on his 3rd scotch by the time I opened my mouth. He's a retired investment banker who still acts like he's the CEO of something. He sees the world in spreadsheets and risk profiles. My mother, Patricia, was sitting next to him in a silk blouse that probably cost more than my oven. She's all pearls and posture, and her smile has always been more performative than maternal. Chase, my older brother, was on his phone, probably tracking the market or texting one of his investment clients. I took a breath and said, "I signed the lease. It's official. I'm opening a restaurant in Cambridge." There was a long pause, a silence that could have been mistaken for awe if I didn't know them better. "You mean, like a real restaurant?" Patricia asked, blinking. "Yes, Mom. Real walls, real tables, a full kitchen." "But why?" she replied, as if I'd told her I'd joined a cult. "Because it's what I've been working toward my whole life." Gregory sipped his scotch and shook his head. "You know restaurants fail, right? 8 out of 10. That's not a career, Aubrey. That's a gamble." "It's a vision." "You had a full ride to Wharton," he said, as if that somehow erased everything I'd done since. "I walked away from Wharton because I couldn't breathe in that world." Chase finally looked up from his phone. "Just don't come asking for a bailout when it all burns down." "I won't," I said, "but when it doesn't, don't come asking for a table either." They didn't laugh, they didn't toast, they didn't even acknowledge the courage it took to say what I said. The rest of the dinner was spent discussing real estate trends and the inflation rate. I left early. Back in Boston, I threw myself even harder into the build-out. I painted walls until my fingers cramped. I hauled crates of plates and silverware. I passed out every night on a cot in the basement, surrounded by paint cans and dust. But I never doubted it. Not once. 3 weeks before the opening, I sent invitations. Not a group text, not an email blast. Black envelopes, gold-foiled lettering, handwritten names, Gregory, Patricia, Chase. I didn't expect much, but part of me hoped. I checked the tracking numbers obsessively. Delivered. Read. No reply. Not even a congrats. Not even a good luck. And still, the day before the grand opening, I stood alone in my nearly finished restaurant, staring at the tables dressed in emerald linens, watching the lights flicker on one by one. It was everything I'd dreamed of, except empty, and I whispered to myself, "Please, just show up. Please prove me wrong." But deep down, I knew they wouldn't. The sun rose over Cambridge with a strange kind of silence, as if even the city was holding its breath for what was about to unfold. I hadn't slept much, maybe 3 hours, 4 at best, but I wasn't tired. I was wired, heart racing, mind already moving in service mode. Today wasn't just another opening night. It was the night, the day everything I had ever fought for, bled for, cried for, was about to be plated and served with white linen, flickering candles, and quiet music in the background. It was the culmination of every "you'll never make it" I'd ever been handed by people who didn't know my fire. And I wasn't just opening a restaurant tonight. I was opening a chapter, a monument carved from my own doubt and my refusal to let it win. I stood in front of the mirror in my little studio above the restaurant, tying the final knot on my jet-black apron. My chef's coat was freshly pressed. Gold embroidery glimmered under the sunlight slipping through the blinds. Aubrey Collins, Executive Chef. Below it, in slightly smaller letters, "Cook like you're telling a secret." I traced my fingers over those words. Grandma Jo's voice echoed in my chest. Downstairs, the kitchen was already alive. The air buzzed with citrus peels and the sharp scent of white vinegar. Stainless steel counters gleamed. The low hum of refrigeration mixed with the staccato rhythm of knives dancing on cutting boards. Every corner felt like a symphony of tension and timing. "Morning, Chef," Darren said without looking up, already knee-deep in prepping halibut fillets. "Morning," I said. "Seafood look good?" "Gorgeous. Cape Cod did not disappoint." "Good. Let's make them remember this night." Lexi was at the pastry station, humming some indie track I didn't recognize, carefully layering bourbon maple custard into tart shells with a precision that would make surgeons jealous. "Don't forget the edible violets this time," I teased. She didn't even look up. "I never forget the drama, Chef." At 3:00 p.m. sharp, Jessica arrived, clipboard in hand, headset snug on her head, like she was preparing to direct a heist. She looked me over and grinned. "Nervous?" I shook my head. "No, I'm ready." And I was. More than I had ever been. By 5:45 p.m., the staff had their final briefing. Every table was perfectly set. The menus had been inspected, the wine list finalized, the servers rehearsed the welcome speech 3 times. We'd even adjusted the lighting. Warm, low, intimate. Every candle placed by hand, every wine glass polished until it shimmered like crystal under the pendant lights. The playlist? Curated down to the second. Jazz, soft folk, and the occasional classical swell to mark key moments in the meal. Outside, a line had already begun to form, and inside, Ember and Oak looked like something from a dream. But there was still one thing missing. I checked my phone. Nothing. No text from Mom, no voicemail from Dad, no sarcastic good luck from Chase. Nothing. At 6:15 p.m., the first guests walked through the tall glass doors. A couple in their 50s, hands clasped. The woman gasped when she saw the lighting. The man smiled wide when he caught the scent of garlic and shallot in the air. "This is beautiful," he whispered. By 6:30, every table was filled. The hum of conversation filled the room. Servers glided across the floor like they were dancing, plates in hand, backs straight, timing precise. In the kitchen, I called out my first order with a voice I barely recognized as my own. "Table 5, 2 crab cakes, 1 duck confit, 1 gnocchi. Fire in 5. "Yes, chef." It had begun. From the kitchen window, I watched the night unfold like a play I had written in a dream. I saw a couple tear up over the crawfish bisque, said it tasted just like her grandmother's. I saw a man close his eyes with the first bite of beignet, then nod slowly as if confirming a memory. Every plate left the past like a love letter. And I felt it in my bones. We were doing it. This wasn't just going well. This was magic. At 7:04 p.m., Jessica slipped into the kitchen. "You have to see this." She handed me her phone. On the screen, Instagram posts already going viral. Ember and Oak is the real deal. Boston's new culinary temple. Chef Collins, remember the name? I blinked, swallowed hard, and whispered, "We're not just surviving, we're soaring." And yet, I checked my phone again. Still nothing. No missed calls, no texts, no congratulations, no, "We're proud of you." At 8:12 p.m., I slipped into the back office and closed the door. My hands were shaking, not from adrenaline, but from something else. I pulled out my phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Aubrey? Hi, Mom. Is everything okay?" "Yeah, it's tonight." "What's tonight?" I closed my eyes. "The restaurant. Ember and Oak. It's opening night." There was silence. Then, Oh, honey, I completely forgot. I'm at a fundraiser right now. Can I call you tomorrow?" "I didn't want to call," I said softly. "I wanted you here." "Aubrey," she sighed, like I was being unreasonable. "It's just one night." "No," I said. "It's the night." "I'm sorry. You know how busy your father and I are." "Yeah," I replied, numb. "I do." I hung up and stared at the screen for a long time. Then I did the unthinkable. I called Chase. It rang 5 times. "Yo, Obs?" "Hey, just wondering. Are you coming?" He laughed. "Tonight? No chance. Got a dinner with a venture capital guy. Big deal. Maybe next week." "You're not coming?" "Come on, Obs. It's a restaurant. You'll have 1,000 more nights." "But this is the night. You'll get over it." And he hung up. I didn't cry. Not this time. I stood up, straightened my apron, washed my hands, and walked back into the kitchen. Because even if they didn't show up, I did. And so did the people who mattered. By 9:30, Ember and Oak was alive with joy. Critics complimented the pacing of the courses. Guests lingered over dessert, ordering second rounds of wine just to stay in the space a little longer. The scallop crudo had been reposted on Instagram by a local food influencer with over 500,000 followers. Lexi passed by me in the kitchen. "You good?" "No." "Want to scream in the walk-in?" "Maybe later." She handed me a spoon of her bourbon maple custard and winked. "Then take a breath, chef, because this is what winning tastes like." At 10:00 p.m., with the last tables winding down, I stood at the center of the restaurant, asked for silence, and raised my glass. "I don't have a speech," I said, because I didn't expect to be this overwhelmed. But I just want to say one thing. Thank you. Thank you for seeing me, for trusting me, for believing in a place that started as a whisper and became a fire. The room erupted in applause, and for the first time all night, I let myself smile. Later, long after the final guest left, I sat on the kitchen floor with Lexi and Darren, drinking cheap champagne from plastic cups. "To us," Darren said. "To Ember and Oak," Lexi added. "To the family we choose," I whispered, and deep inside, I meant it. Because the people I thought I needed, they had chosen not to show up. But this team, this place, this dream, they did, and that made all the difference. The morning after Ember and Oak's grand opening arrived like a slow exhale from the universe. I stood barefoot in the kitchen, the tiles cool beneath my feet, a steaming cup of chicory coffee in my hands. The air still smelled faintly of the night before, thyme, butter, charred citrus zest clinging to the walls like memory. The kind of lingering scent that made you feel like you were waking up inside a dream you didn't want to end. It had been beautiful. The food, the energy, the way people leaned in over candlelight like they were sharing secrets between bites of scallop crudo and bourbon beignets. But as I stood there, alone in the quiet, a dull ache remained beneath the buzz. Because in the midst of the clinking glasses and the five-star praise, there had been 3 empty seats. 3 that mattered more than any critic or influencer or camera flash, and they never showed up. The door creaked open behind me. Jessica stepped in, still wearing last night's eyeliner, carrying 2 coffees and something folded under her arm. "You haven't slept, have you?" she asked. "Does a 2-hour nap count?" She smirked. "Barely. Here." She handed me the coffee, then unfolded the newspaper she was holding. The Boston Herald. Front page of the food section. Full color. Big headline. My name. Collins ignites Boston. Ember and Oak delivers soul on a plate. There was a photo, me, mid-service, torch in hand, eyes sharp, face fierce. And under it, a review that didn't just praise the food, it felt the food. The critic described my duck confit as a memory wrapped in richness, my truffle-stuffed beignets as an edible love letter to resilience. In every dish you taste not just technique, but a story, one of fire, one of grit, one of a woman who dared to believe in herself when no one else did. I blinked back tears, running my thumb over the ink like it might dissolve if I stared too long. I had dreamed of moments like this, but I hadn't known they would feel so bittersweet. By noon, the phone lines were overwhelmed. Jessica had to bring in 2 extra hosts just to handle the volume. "Hi, is this Ember and Oak? I'd like to book a reservation." "Yes, we're currently booked through the next 3 months." 3 months? "We can add you to our wait list. It's currently at 384 guests." By 2 p.m., we had stopped taking calls altogether and redirected everyone to an online form that was just as full. Then came the emails from Vogue, Bon Appetit, The New York Times, Forbes, NPR. They wanted interviews, photo shoots, TV spots. Someone from a streaming platform sent an inquiry about a documentary. Then came the agents, book deals, speaking tours, guest lectures. One woman even asked if I wanted to be on a panel at Harvard called Modern Culinary Entrepreneurs and the Power of Personal Branding. I read the subject line 3 times before closing the email, because while the world was finally noticing me, my family still wasn't. That evening, I sat on the rooftop with a glass of wine and my phone in my lap. Still no texts, no calls, no, "Hey, we saw the news," not even a damn emoji. It didn't hurt like it did before. But it didn't feel good either. 3 days later, an envelope arrived. Thick, black, embossed. Inside, "Chef Collins, your establishment has been reviewed by a representative of the Michelin Guide. We are pleased to inform you that Ember and Oak is officially under consideration." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat very still. Because I'd always believed this dream was possible. But believing it and living it were 2 different things. I folded the letter, slipped it into the drawer beside Grandma Joe's handwritten gumbo recipe, and whispered, "We did it." Then came the week that changed everything. Time magazine featured me in a piece titled 10 Female Chefs Reshaping American Cuisine. a food blogger with over 2 million followers, posted a full video review of our 12-course tasting menu that got over 500,000 views in 48 hours. We were booked out for 6 months, and yet still nothing from home. It was like I existed on a different planet. Until one afternoon, Jessica walked into the kitchen with a look that froze me mid-step. "Chef, Chase just called." I raised an eyebrow. "He wants to book a table for a VIP client. Said it's urgent." I didn't respond right away. Jessica tilted her head. "Want me to tell him we're booked?" I nodded. "Tell him the wait list is 6 months long." She hesitated. "You sure?" I looked her dead in the eye. "If he couldn't show up when there were seats open, he doesn't get to sit down now that the world is watching." Jessica grinned. "You're my hero." Later that night, I got a text from him. "Chase. Come on, Obs, just one table. You'd be helping me close a major deal." Me. "I helped you my whole life. You never noticed. Now you can wait your turn." He didn't reply. But the next day, the phone rang again. "Mom." I let it go to voicemail. Then again. Finally, I answered. "Aubrey," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "What?" "We saw the article in Time. Your father and I were proud." I scoffed. "Proud? You didn't even come to the opening." "We made a mistake. We should have believed in you." "You had 1,000 chances." She was quiet. "Can we make it up to you? Just have dinner as a family?" "We're booked," I said. "Aubrey, the next available table is in March. You're welcome to make a reservation like everyone else." She sniffled. "You're really going to treat us like strangers? You treated me like a disappointment for 15 years. So, yeah." And I hung up. That night, I stood by the front windows of the restaurant as it buzzed with life behind me. People were laughing, eating, loving. The city lights shimmered on the glass. And I whispered to myself, they're finally noticing. But I no longer need them to, because for the first time in my life, I was full. It started with a name on the reservation list. Nothing dramatic, no parade, no "we're so sorry" email, no handwritten apology wrapped in velvet ribbon. Just a name. Chase Collins. Date: Friday night, party of 3, table requested, window view. At first I thought it had to be a mistake. He wasn't the sentimental type. He never did anything without an angle. And if he was coming here to Ember and Oak after all this time, it wasn't because he missed me. It was because he needed something. And sure enough, when Jessica double-checked the booking with the contact number attached, it all came together. "Chef, he said it's for a client," she explained, tapping her headset. "Some real estate exec from San Francisco. Big deal, wants to impress her. He specifically asked if you could comp the champagne flight." I just stared at her for a moment. "Did you tell him I'm a chef, not a charity?" She smiled. "Verbatim." "Good. Then move his name to the standard wait list. 6 months out, no VIP slots, no special favors." Jessica's grin widened. "God, I love this version of you." But that was just the beginning. The next day, a call came from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail, then another. This time it rang longer, persistent. Then, "Mom." I stared at her name glowing on my screen like it was a threat. She hadn't called in months. Not for the Michelin nomination, not for the Time magazine article, not for the Boston Herald front page, not even after Chase's little failed attempt to skip the line. But now? Now she wanted to talk. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Aubrey?" she said, voice low, almost breathless. Hi, sweetheart." "Is something wrong?" No, it's just, I saw the Forbes feature, the pictures, the write-up. They said your restaurant is the best new spot in New England." They did. And the review from Bon Appetit. That was impressive. "Thanks." Silence stretched between us. Uncomfortable. Heavy. The kind of silence that makes you want to fill it with small talk. But we had no small left to talk about. "Your father read it too," she said finally. He was surprised." "Was he?" Yes, and, well, we were wondering if maybe we could come in for dinner sometime. We're fully booked until next year. I know, I checked. Then you know the answer. But can't you make an exception? For us? You mean the way you made an exception for me when I opened my life's work and invited you, and you never even replied? She didn't say anything. This is different, she said softly. We were wrong. I laughed. It wasn't joyful. It's not different, it's just inconvenient for you now. Aubrey, I begged you to come that night, Mom. I called. I left voicemails. I cried in the walk-in fridge before service started. Do you have any idea what it feels like to have every seat in your house filled, except the ones that should have mattered the most? I could hear her swallow on the other end. We made a mistake. A terrible one. Yeah. And now you want a reservation. No. We want to fix things. I exhaled. There's no fixing. There's only accepting. I'm not mad anymore, Mom. I'm not bitter. I've moved on. But you don't get front row seats now just because the show is sold out. Silence again. So, that's it? That's it? And I hung up. The next week passed in a whirlwind. The Michelin inspector's second visit came and went, anonymous, precise, silent as always. But when he cleared his plate of the new seasonal foie gras brulee, I saw the tiniest nod. Jessica whispered later that night, "He smiled, Chef. You got him." I didn't smile back. Not yet. Not until I had that star in my hands. Then came the letter, this time from my father, delivered in a thick envelope, typewritten, formal, like a business contract. Aubrey, I owe you more than an apology. I owe you years of belief I never gave you. You proved us wrong. You proved me wrong. I was so wrapped up in metrics, in risk analysis, in return on investment, that I couldn't see the fire in front of me. If you'll allow it, your mother and I would like to come to Ember and Oak. No special treatment. No expectations. We'll take the first table that opens. Love, Dad. I folded the letter slowly. I didn't tear it. I didn't throw it away. I just slipped it into the drawer beside Grandma Jo's recipe notebook. Some things didn't need a response. 3 weeks later, Jessica burst into the kitchen holding her iPad like it was an artifact. "Chef, you might want to sit down." "Did we get the star?" "Not yet. But something else. Look." She turned the screen around. Gregory Collins, Patricia Collins, Chase Collins. They had made a reservation, online, like everyone else. And they had waited. 4 months. Friday came. Rain poured over Cambridge, making the streets glisten with silver reflections. The dining room buzzed with usual energy, guests whispering over roasted duck, the scent of smoked paprika and lemon zest rising in gentle waves from the kitchen. At 7:04 p.m., Jessica whispered in my ear, "They're here, table 12. The best seat in the house." I didn't flinch. I didn't go out. Instead, I moved back to the line and plated a seared halibut like my life depended on it. From the kitchen's edge, I could see them. My father, stiff-backed, stirring his wine slowly. My mother, wide-eyed, scanning every detail. Chase, trying to look casual, but fiddling with his napkin like he was 12 again. They didn't speak much, didn't pull out their phones, didn't pretend to be above it. They ate, silently, slowly. And when the beignets arrived, the ones with the bourbon glaze and sea salt, I saw my mother wipe the corner of her eye. Later, Jessica came back into the kitchen. "They asked to see you." "And?" "I told them you were busy." "Good. You sure you don't want to talk to them?" I hesitated, then said, "Let them wait," like I did. By 9:00 p.m., most of the guests had gone. Only a few lingered over digestifs and espresso. I stepped into the dining room. The air was quieter now, still pulsing with the hum of satisfied diners. When I approached table 12, all 3 of them stood at once. "Aubrey," Mom whispered, "this was extraordinary." "Truly," Dad added, "you've built something bigger than a restaurant." "It's magic," Chase said. I looked at each of them in turn. "You came for a meal," I said. "You got it." "We came for more than that," Mom said gently. "We came to see you. I invited you 2 years ago. "We know," Dad admitted. "And we were wrong. Do you want to be forgiven?" I asked. They didn't answer. "Or do you just want to feel less guilty?" That hit hard. "We're sorry," Mom said. "Truly, for all of it." I nodded once. "I accept your apology, but don't expect things to go back to how they were, because I'm not who I was." Chase stepped forward. "Can we start again?" I smiled, just a little. "You can make another reservation." And I walked away. Back in the kitchen, Jessica handed me a spoon of lemon custard from a new dish. "How'd it go?" I said what I needed to say. And it's not about them anymore. That night, as I locked up, the city buzzed outside, but I felt still, peaceful. Not because they had come back, but because I didn't need them to. And that was the most powerful part of all. The kitchen was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I stood by the deep sink, hands resting on the edge of the stainless steel counter, the echo of the night still dancing across the tiled walls. Jessica had dimmed the lights in the dining room. Darren and Lexi were in the back, finishing their closing checks, and the last of the wine glasses had been polished and shelved. It was over. They came, they ate, they apologized, and now the weight I thought I'd carry forever had finally started to lift. But not in the way I expected. It wasn't their words that gave me peace. It was the silence afterward. That moment I walked away from table 12 without needing validation, revenge, or a dramatic declaration of forgiveness. Just clarity. They had taken years of my confidence, my joy, my sense of worth. They chipped away at my voice until it barely whispered. But tonight, when they asked for a second chance, I realized something powerful. I had already given myself that chance, and I'd made something beautiful with it. Back in my office, I took off my coat and hung it on the same hook where my first chef's apron still hung, faded, frayed, and splattered with memories I didn't have the heart to wash out. I sat down at my desk, reached into the drawer, and pulled out the envelope my mother had left. It was cream-colored, heavy, unopened. I turned it over in my hands, and then I set it back down, still unopened. Not out of anger, not to prove a point, but because I didn't need what was inside. That night, as rain tapped gently on the skylight, I curled up in the small leather chair Grandma Jo had given me when I left for culinary school. I wrapped myself in the same wool blanket I'd once used during late shifts when the basement cot was my only home. I wasn't the same woman anymore. And this restaurant, it wasn't just a restaurant, it was proof that it's possible to break the cycle, that you can survive being unloved by the people who were supposed to love you and still create something warm, something worthy. The next morning, news broke. Ember and Oak awarded 3 Michelin stars in record time. It was everywhere, on the food blogs, on Good Morning America, even on the cover of Time under the headline, "The Chef Who Cooked with Her Heart and Won." Jessica burst into the kitchen with tears in her eyes and the printout clutched in her hand. "Chef, it's official. We did it." I didn't scream, didn't cry. I just smiled, quietly, gratefully. Then I walked over to the prep table, picked up a knife, and said, "All right, team, back to work. These tomatoes aren't going to confit themselves." Over the next few weeks, the world came rushing in. Vogue wanted a cover shoot. Netflix pitched a docuseries. Harvard invited me to speak at their business school. I turned most of it down, not because I wasn't honored, but because I wasn't finished building this place yet. And more than that, I wasn't chasing fame. I was chasing freedom, and I'd finally caught it. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, as we prepped for dinner service, a young woman approached the kitchen pass window. She had big eyes and a nervous smile, holding a beat-up notebook in one hand and a copy of the Boston Herald in the other. "Are you Chef Aubrey?" "That depends," I replied, setting down a bowl of microgreens. "Am I in trouble?" She laughed. "No, it's just, I'm applying to culinary school. I read your story. I've never seen anyone like me do what you did. My parents think it's a stupid dream, but—" Her voice trailed off. I stepped out from behind the counter and looked her in the eyes. "You don't need them to believe in it. You just need you." She nodded slowly, lip trembling. "Can I show you my dishes sometime?" Come back Friday. Shadow Lexi. You'll learn more in 2 hours than in 2 semesters." She beamed. And just like that, I knew. This was it. This was the legacy. Not the stars, not the headlines, not even the full tables, but this. The chance to give someone the thing I never got. Belief. That evening, I stood at the window of Ember and Oak, watching the city shimmer through the spring drizzle. Inside, the space glowed with laughter and warmth. Couples leaned in over candlelight. Friends toasted with golden cocktails. A father and daughter shared bread pudding at table 7. I thought of my own family. I wondered if they understood now. Not just what I had built, but why. And then I realized it didn't matter because I understood. I had built a home out of every piece they tried to break. And now, for the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting at the door for anyone. That night, I opened Grandma Jo's old recipe journal. On a blank page, I wrote, "New dish, freedom tart, lemon custard, smoked sea salt crust, fig and thyme compote, bitter, sweet, whole." I smiled, then closed the book. My family didn't show up for my grand opening, but I still opened the doors. I still lit the flame. I still cooked my truth, and in doing so, I found something stronger than validation. I found peace. True success isn't about proving people wrong. It's about proving yourself right, quietly, completely, and without apology.